Hey everybody, I see folks starting to join and hmm. Oh, let's turn on closed captioning before we forget. Let's do that before we really get into the nitty-gritty today. I think our moderator on the back end, Isabella, will turn on that feature so we can get that on for everybody. But welcome. I see so many people joining and some familiar faces. We're excited to have you on today's webinar, and there's so much to cover, so we'll get started shortly, but I'm gonna kick us off with some housekeeping tips. I'm the moderator today. My name is Megan Cornwell, and I'm in marketing here at Teachstone and have so many amazing opportunities to work with my co-host or the host of the webinar today, Michelle Schmidt and Marnetta Larrimer. But before we do intros with the team, we're going to kick it off to the next slide, and I will talk a little bit more about the plan for today. So you all registered to learn a little bit more about class environment, about the environment and how it supports interactions in the classroom. And that's exactly what we're covering today. We're going to kick it off with some welcome, the housekeeping notes, and then we'll get into why the environment matters, what good environments look like, and what we mean when we talk about environment. And then we'll get into a little bit more of the details on class environment and how it's a little bit different from the class tool that you might already be familiar with. And you might have noticed we are recording today's presentation. We can go to the next slide. And just of note, you don't have to worry about your camera or your mic. They are automatically muted. So if you have to get up and like grab some water, that's okay. We can't see or hear you. You're totally fine. But because we're recording, we'll be able to share the recording tomorrow with you via email, and we'll share the copy of the slides. A lot of folks always want to get access to the slides, and don't worry, we'll share that with you in PDF format, and we will share a certificate of attendance to show that you attended for an hour. And you don't have to like log in and give us your name. Your attendance is automatically noted with our software. But we really want this to be an engaging experience. At Teachstone, we're all about interaction. So I already see so many people joining in the chat box and interacting with each other. You let us know exactly where you're joining from and what you're excited to hear about. You can also use the Q&A box there at the bottom. It's separate from the chat box. If you have private questions for the presenters, don't necessarily want everybody to see that, or if you really want to get your question answered, that is easier for our presenters to keep an eye on the Q&A box. So it helps us just keep tabs on the things that we've already answered. So feel free to submit a Q&A at any time, and we'll have time throughout the presentation for you to ask all of your questions. All right, let's kick it off with, introducing more of our hosts. We've got Michelle Schmidt, Marnetta Larrimer, who are on our professional services team here at Teachstone. Would you mind introducing yourself and telling us a little bit about your background? Marnetta, you want to kick us off?
I would love to kick us off. Hi, I'm Marnetta Larrimer. Welcome, welcome, welcome. Lots of familiar faces, some from, old working acquaintances, but also just building those connections across my time here at Teachstone. I am a professional services manager here, and I support our internal class specialists. So a lot of the faces that you see out delivering trainings for you, we all work together to make sure that you have this seamless process in learning about class and applying it to your programs. I also host Impact in the Classroom, in case you haven't noticed. It's running on all your podcast platforms. So make sure that you listen in. But I'm excited to be here to talk about environments today.
Great. Well, hello, everyone. My name is Michelle Schmidt. I am also a professional services manager here at Teachstone for our quality assurance. Similar to Marnetta, I am a former class specialist. So we spend time, doing trainings and coaching and observations and all sorts of different ways that we're supporting educators and children and their interactions in the classroom. And we're looking forward to spending the next hour or so with you all diving into environments. So thank you for being here.
Thank you both for joining and hosting today. I'm excited to get more into it. So let's start with an icebreaker question. I know there's already so many engagements in the chat, but let's hear a little bit more from each other. We're going to challenge you to answer this prompt, and feel free to share in the chat, but if you just want to reflect or write it down in a notebook, you might have nearby. That's great too. But let's think about a time that you felt uncomfortable to learn as a participant in a class or training or conference. And what made you feel that way? What made you feel like you were not in a great place, maybe emotionally or physically, in a class or training? Marnetta or Michelle, do you have any answers to that while folks started to chat in?
Yeah, I do. I think for me, it's cramped quarters are always challenging, right? No space really to, I don't know, breathe, but also, right, like to be able to do any work. If my elbows are touching other people, like that's a barrier to me. Learning, I really have to have space in order to fidget and, you know, take notes and things. So space is a big thing for me.
Yeah,
Mhm.
I totally agree, Marnetta. That's what I was thinking about. It's just, and when we used to do all in person, now we have a mix of different formats, but I just know, like, when there's a tables, there's space, you can spread out, you can, have the things you need. That's always something that helps automatically, like, you feel comfortable. And so space is definitely a thing that I think about. I see
I
some.
see the one thing that everybody, or not everybody, but a few people are saying that really resonates to me. And that's when a space is too hot or too cold. I
Yes.
cannot focus when I'm sitting there shivering or just sweating buckets. How am I supposed to pay attention to the training when all I can think about is just like, I'm so uncomfortable?
Right. There's lots of resonance with space, and having space to move around and stuff. But also someone said something really interesting about being judged for answering too often. Right. So, how sometimes when you're in a group, you want participation, right? But getting judged because you want to participate too much, that would be challenging, right? Yeah, I can see that as being annoying. As a facilitator, I want all of it because I'd rather that than dead space. So don't think that you can answer too much in this space. Training not being hands-on, another thing when we think about learners, right? Modalities and having hands-on opportunities for concrete learning is essential. So I agree there. I have a very short attention span. So if I don't have hands-on, I'm going to find something else to do. So you might have a portrait of your face when I get done, or I might have made a Play-Doh sculpture at the end, if I don't have anything to tie to that. Passion about the topic. That's interesting. And I can understand that, because how do you have buy-in or get this belief or even feel that they have knowledge or expertise if they don't have that passion? But also their energy helps to move you through like the training or the time. So space, materials, not meeting your needs.
I saw
Yeah.
one before that somebody said they didn't have chairs or tables.
Hmm.
That would be a
What?
challenge.
So you were standing?
That's what it sounds like. Yeah.
Oh my goodness. Oh yes. That would be hard, especially depending on how long it is. I'm gonna need a good chair, is all I'm gonna say. And I am not mobile enough to sit on the floor. That because then everybody's gonna have to help me get up, is all I'm gonna say. That's the hands-on activity, is getting me up from the floor. Trainers who are not open to questions or feedback. How do you have those back and forth and scaffold and deepen understanding if there's that barrier to learning? Reading format, small groups, breakouts. Somebody said they like, okay, snacks. I'm all about the snacks. Snacks, and fidgets are my thing. um, Not allowed to share your thoughts. Small chairs for adults, another challenge. I like it. I have little legs, so I don't mind the small chairs, so my feet can be planted, but not good for the rest of my body. So I agree with that as well.
I also saw one that said like pressure to participate when you're like maybe not in the mood or don't feel like it. And that's what I think about, also having different ways to engage and participate. And that ties into those modalities, hands-on and stuff. So, everyone is kind of different, has a different comfort level, giving people the options, right? Having different opportunities and options.
I love that you pointed that out because some people are processors, right? As chatty as I am, when it's heavier things, I need a moment to think. Let me ponder, right? And so sometimes it's just giving them that space to process and letting them come back. And so it's not a disengagement or disconnection. It's really just taking in what's happening and wrapping your head around it. That's a good call out, Michelle.
I agree.
I'm gonna let you both read through a few more, and I will leave you to it for the rest of the presentation. But I did right before before I bow out, I'm gonna remind folks that we are recording. I saw a couple more questions, so we'll send you the recording afterwards. No worries. But Michelle and Marnetta, take it away.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you. Lots of great, lots of great things in the chat. I think feeling comfortable sharing and having verbal contribution acknowledged during a discussion, absolutely, because you want to feel part of the learning. You want to feel part of the process. Too much clutter. I'm just excited about not only the responses, but how it ties into what we're going to be talking about today. Right? The same barriers, those same challenges to their environment and their learning are some of the things that we're going to be talking to today during our time together. So I'm
already like seeing those connections and like when what people are sharing, I'm like, yeah, we're gonna, we're gonna get there. So definitely. I also saw one, I feel like it seemed having no agenda or objectives seems maybe very simple and, you take it for granted, but that's one of those things that helps, set the stage, make sure everyone's on the same page. I know me, I like the big picture. I like to know what's coming. I like to know the end goal of things. Makes me feel comfortable, just having that knowledge.
Yeah. And also just knowing how this training is going to benefit you, what you're going to get out on the other end, right? Those objectives, kind of frame what you're going to be learning and how, and what I'll be able to take out of it. And it just helps people to attend differently.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Agree.
Not having enough time to process the materials. Absolutely. Wonderful responses. We appreciate you all thinking and reflecting about your own personal time. And now we're going to transition to how those same feelings about your learning environment is mirrors what's happening in children's classrooms and how it impacts their learning. Next slide, please. So when we think about the learning environment, it's a direct image of the teacher's planning and the students' learning. It's where both teachers and students will spend most of their time, and it's a place that they can call their own and they should be able to relate to. It should be well organized, comfortable, personable, and offer a variety of manipulatives and materials for cognitive, social, emotional, and physical development.
Great. So we're going to take a look at some of the examples of how our environment can help interactions. And this first one we have is, and you can see from the example, the way you set up your environment and make materials accessible can help empower students by giving them ability to develop some independence, try new things out, access things on their own, and not always having to go to the educator in the room.
Yeah, play is a very important role in children's lives, right? And if you think about it, it's an action involving fun and learning in which the child willingly participates while those materials are tools that they use while performing those actions, right? So how we dress the classroom is very important to how they're going to play and learn. It contributes to the development of cognitive, motor, psychosocial, emotional, and linguistic skills. But that accessibility allows children to safely work through challenges, right? That boost independence, self-esteem, especially when they're successful, right? I'm able to get this off the shelf myself. Yay me, right? I did not need your support in this. I can do these things by myself. But again, you have to think about how it also lends to their problem solving skills. And what we want at the end of the day is, these self-confident, creative, and happy children, and how we empower them and allow them to have access to their learning independently, without, again, like Michelle said, having to rely on the teachers so heavily. That's how we end up with that result.
Yeah, I wanted to add, Marnetta, you said that problem solving, and it's like part of life skills too, right? We want to be able to do those things on our own, and we have to give them the opportunities, make those options available for them. One thing to note though is, we would say not every single thing needs to be available at all times, right? Like your paint bottles don't need to be sitting there for your kids to, just go grab and squeeze. So within reason, so don't get too nervous about when we this. But I just wanted to add that piece.
And as I'm looking at these shelves, I can't help but add, as you're thinking about this independence and creating, this safe space, you don't want your heavier items on the top, right? You may want to put your heavier items on the bottom so they can still, access them and get them themselves, but they wouldn't hurt themselves. So lots of things to think about when we're thinking about empowering them in that space. Leslie has their hand raised. Leslie, do you want to say something? Can you do it in the QA or the chat so that we can support that?
And one last thing here, I think, just to think about the flip side of it. If you've ever, I don't know, Marnetta, if you've ever been into a room and seen the shelves actually turned around or closed, and just if everyone just takes a moment to think from the child's perspective, what message is that sending to the children in the classroom, right? When that is all just closed off, just kind of walk yourself through that and always kind of take their perspective.
Yeah, no, I've never seen a classroom where I walked in where the, I have many.
Okay, I was like, you haven't?
No, I was joking. Yeah, it's definitely, I think I remember one classroom I was in and the shelves were turned, and I've spent so much time watching children trying to turn the shelves around, right? Which created problems in the classroom behaviorally, right? But also they were fighting, like they were just trying to figure out how to get them open. And, but the teacher was reading a book, but they weren't interested in that. They really just wanted these shelves open. And I don't even know if they really wanted the things that were on the shelves, but I think it was just this barrier to their independence that they just really didn't want, right? So that was interesting in that instance to see. Let's
Marnetta, you see the chat's got some things coming up in the chat.
I know, I see. Someone said, what about covering the shelves just for large group? What are your thoughts, Michelle?
I mean, I think, and I really like Angela put in the chat, this comment that kind of ties in about, viewing that environment as a way to empower children it's a great way to encourage educators to think about their classrooms. And so, I think, and all our spaces are differently, right? Are different, but thinking about, well, is that where you want to hold that large group, or, just thinking about the big picture, maybe having the shelves right beside where you're going to hold large group isn't going to be the best way to place it. But also I want to acknowledge that we all are dealing with different kind of restrictions as far as the spaces we have. So we do have to kind of be flexible and be creative, right? Yes. So Jacqueline, you said space is limited. Yes, exactly. So sometimes that's not always an option. What are your thoughts, Marnetta?
Well, I love where you were going, and I was going to lean into what Jacqueline was saying. When we're always teaching children and we have these routines, and so if that's a routine of a visual reminder of shifting focus, I don't see a problem with a sheet over the space, right, over the shelf, because it's a visual reminder. Okay, centers are closed, we're moving to this other thing. As long as a sheet, a sheet they can still move, and they can still access and get to. It's not a closed door or a lock, but I think it's a great visual reminder on how to focus their attention while making things still available.
Yeah, agree. I feel like if depending on, you have a different space you could use, maybe use a different space. But if that's, limitation, then we're creative, right? Be creative, you can do that. And yeah, it's about setting up those procedures that help kind of communicate the expectations, help children understand what's available and when, right?
Someone said
Okay.
that they use Velcro. I love the idea of that, but I don't know, like that sound all day for me might be might be a thing. But if you can get around the sound, I love the idea of that. So that we have this security, but also it's just, that's another skill, right? Like a fine motor, right? Skill of, opening, closing. So you're also getting a little bit of challenge and skill building in that. So I love the idea of that.
And it gives them also, there we go, giving them also empowering them to open and close the centers. Like that's, they're that adding to it. I love that too.
I love it. What do we have next? Love this one. So, I guess I'm speaking on this one. I thought you were gonna sorry, Michelle.
Jump in.
So this one is about educators and students feeling safe and welcome, right? And we see some diverse materials in there. And then we have this displaying of children's work, right? And we want to do that so that children can take pride in their work, and they also can feel a sense of ownership in the room. Doing this also offers opportunities for language development, right? Children talking about their work or commenting on other children's work. Teachers can use those opportunities to build language skills. So many opportunities when we create a space where they are really represented in the things that they are doing in it.
I definitely love that. And this is another place where you can be creative about what it looks like, what you have available, and lean into your families to kind of get different materials, things from their homes.
Oh, yes, most definitely. Because the more things that represent them in the classroom, the more welcome, right? And the more belonging that they feel. And those things, I think what I love about how we look at environments now, it doesn't have to be these store-bought commercial type of things. It can, I ran a family childcare home, a success, and it was like one of my favorite spaces. And we really leaned into not a lot of money as a family childcare provider. And so being able to bring in other materials and, supply the room with things that were authentic to their communities made for a really welcoming, warm space.
Yeah, I think you'd also be surprised sometimes what families can add to, and the different, rich backgrounds they might have. And then it just further builds that family and culture and community that you have with the children and the parents, and the children being able to share and have that pride in things that they can relate to and expose each other to.
Yeah. And deepens your understanding of the children, because that's really what you want, right? Is to know them so well that even with the most minute nonverbal cue, you know where they are and how to support them. And so you really get an idea of the family structure, right? Which is important to our work because we work, as a collective for the child's betterment. And it just gives you a nice insight, another layer to understanding the children and knowing them on a more personal level as well.
I agree. And I think even the youngest children, I know we're going to dive into more about what the things look like at different ages, but I guess I have a 3-year-old at home. He's no longer like our youngest, but I just remember when he was little, and like Marnetta, you have children too, you might remember, just when their faces light up when they just like see someone they connect to or themselves in something, how powerful that can be, even when they aren't able to express it. You can see it, and you see that that warmth just kind of come out of them.
Yep, that pride and you just see all of it. Right. What's the next one?
All right. Oh, I love this one too. So at this one, we're looking at how we set up our classroom to provide sight lines that are going to make it easier for educators to manage behavior, right? Thinking about that big picture of our classroom and being proactive about how we can utilize our environment to avoid some behaviors that might arise. And so this is just one example of where you can see the teacher could see clearly across the classroom. But there's always going to be sometimes even some little spots, but we want to try our best to kind of set it up to make so we can support children, but also help them be successful, set them up for success with their behavior.
Most definitely. You said a lot, right? When we're thinking about our space, a well-designed physical environment has different activity areas, and those areas are clearly defined, right? It's got visual boundaries, as you just discussed with like the sight lines, and that's defined by how the furniture and the floor coverings, are placed, right? So we're taking those materials, those furnishings, and creating spaces that are comfortable and lend themselves to the intended purpose of the space, right? So we're setting the spaces intentionally for what we want to have happen, while still being able to see everything that's happening. And we talked in the chat about routines, right? And boundaries and things like that. You teach the children how to exist in a space by how it's designed, right? So for example, a block area might have bookshelves to set it off as a block center, and then carpeting or foam to muffle sound. So we'll talk more about sounds and distractions later. Then in the library, you're going to have like soft, comfortable floor covering for adults and children to sit together as they look at the books. So really setting those spaces and being intentional about how those spaces are set does manage the behavior, right? Because it sets an expectation of what should be happening in those spaces.
Yeah, and that intentionality, I think, is also really important. You can set up the classroom, but also utilizing the spaces. So as a educator, if you're going to sit at the small group, for example, in this picture at one of those tables, positioning yourself so that you still can have those sight lines versus your back being to maybe the kitchen center, being on the end of the table where there's a better view of those areas, especially the ones that maybe might be a little bit more difficult for kids or, cause more problems. You want to make sure you have that in your view. And then that's how we're supporting those children and setting them up to be able to meet the expectations that we've communicated to them.
And where the centers are placed, right? You want to be mindful of where things are placed. You don't want loud things next to quiet things. And you want to make sure that there's enough space for what you want to have happen in that area. So one of the things with managing behaviors is if you have a block center and it's like way too small for children to actually engage in that play in the way that they want, that's also where we get into challenging behavior, because we're on top of each other. We're fighting for space, right? We're fighting for that space that we're looking for also when we're attending, trainings and we're doing our learning. So you want to consider like the size and make sure there's enough room that children can be engaged in that space without being crowded. And make sure it's placed to where, again, they can focus their attention in a way that's not distracting. So we would have music next to library, for instance.
And I love, because that made me think of, I just saw recently like a library type area, but it was so small and kids kind of like crowded in, right? And so it caused problems because there was enough space for the children to come pick books. And I think in that same sense, if something doesn't work, don't be afraid to change it, right? I think we need to be flexible. We're constantly learning too. And so when you notice that that's going to be a problem or that there's a hole in your sight line, readjust, right?
Absolutely, because it's not a tree. Right? It's movable. You can move the things, and your class, and that's a great point. Your classrooms should be shifting based off what like your children anyway, right? And so, and the need of the classroom at the time, and what was working at the beginning of the year may not be working, when we get into December or January. And so again, just really thinking about how to best support them and what they are doing in the classroom and where they are developmentally, and what your goals are for the class.
Great. Yeah, I think I wanted to highlight. So we have a question kind of, I think about this example about the tables maybe being too close to one another. If there's a conversation, or if I guess any tables were too close, I would hesitate to speak because the view of this classroom, right? I don't know what the aspect is. But also I think, you know, in that same sense of depending on what's going on, right? We don't really know a lot from this photo of how it's utilized.
I love that you said that, Michelle, because I thought the same thing when I looked at it. I was just like, I think it's the view, right? The perspective of like where we're looking, because it may not be as close as we think. I think because of the angle, it might be closer than it is. But even still, if it was that close, why is there a reason why, right? We don't know what the teacher's function is for having them in that space that way. So what is the function of the blue-green screens? Oh, so much stuff happening. What is the function of the blue-green screens behind the kitchen area?
I'm not quite sure what that is from this photo.
Yeah, I don't know from this photo either, because these are photos from our stock. So I have not been in this classroom. So it's just a photo for us to discuss about, sightlines and how to manage behavior in the classroom. So I do not know. I see some windows back there, but it looks like there's space back behind those screens. So it may be to define the kitchen area, is what it looks like. But
and I think these are just, honestly, we're just some examples, right? And I think we all kind of make different choices sometimes, and you may agree or don't agree. And I love how Marnetta said, like, we've never been in this classroom, so we can't really speak to everything and how it's utilized, but hoping to give you just some ideas or a vision of what it might look in an actual, like a real classroom, right? This, we want to see what things really look like, not kind of set up for just show, right? This is a real classroom.
Absolutely.
Great.
Right.
So there might be sleep barriers. Some people said that.
Yeah. We have all kinds of, right? All the what ifs, right? What could it be? We're playing the guessing game of the classroom now. But yeah, unless I was in the classroom, I wouldn't be able to, or, tell you what the purpose was.
And I think
a great discussion about it.
And Marnetta, I think that's a great kind of point to make. We're doing a lot about talking about environment, but we want to just also acknowledge environment's only one piece of it, right? So it's all about how we are interacting with the environment and utilizing those things, right? So
which brings us to the next thing that we're going to talk about.
Exactly. What a great segue.
What a great segue. Because it's not just about the stuff, right? That's not what this is about. When we think about class environments, it's about the materials and how those materials are used to get more of what we know we need, which is those quality interactions with children. Mm-hmm. So as we look at this, this slide, and we're talking about what we've seen in good classroom environments, we just want to talk about some examples across, and these are across preschool and infant toddler classrooms, but also family home classrooms. And we're just going to talk about, some of those things that we've seen. So let's talk about representations of diversity.
Great. Yeah. And we kind of saw this and talked a little bit about it already on that one slide that had the children's artwork and some pictures of real pictures of children from home, and just the importance of getting real, items that are from the real world of, different cultures as much as you can, having different representation in books, and that, main characters of all different races and ethnicities, and helping children, like I said before, see themselves in, different books, settings, toys, games, like face matching games. I don't know, Marnetta, you want to give some more examples?
I was reading this chat, and we're definitely with some very like-minded. We're preaching to the choir, like they, they're here, but they have exactly what we're talking about, right? Materials are not merely just these passive substances, for children's self-expression or manipulation, but they're vibrant and active entities that, work in dialogue with people, right? And together it's a mutual transformation. So again, not just the things in the classroom, but what are we doing with those things to help to support children in seeing themselves in the classroom. And what I liked about what you said was it's not just a lot of a singular thing, it's represented throughout, right? So it's books, it's in the kitchen, it's in the language, it's in the, right, we have different representation and that diversity, different abilities, right, like all throughout the classroom, and it's not a singular item. And that's how not only do children learn more about the world, but they can see themselves, right, and have that welcome feeling in the classroom. Marie, why are books a challenge? Oh. Well, Marie, that sounds like another webinar.
Yeah, I think, and also like, we don't have to get books that are like explicitly speaking to something, but just even thinking, like, go home, take a book inventory, right? It's in your classroom, divide them up of like who the main characters are. And I guarantee you will surprisingly see animals as one of the main things. There's more children's book out there with animals as the main characters than there are with children of different races as the main character.
But it's also making sure that they're not stereotypical roles, right? And that was the hardest. When I did my first book inventory, I was like, oh my gosh, all these at-home people are moms. Dads stay at home, right? And moms carry the role of the worker. So it was also just, girls can be doctors and construction workers, and right, like, and just changing also that stereotypical gender role. So my first inventory, that was the first thing that I noticed was like, these are very stereotypical roles. And I need to shift that up.
I know. And I love, there's a couple of people in the chat, they mentioned creating some of those like homemade books, having pictures of the children in your classroom and creating books. Yeah, I think that's also another great way just to further deepen that community with those children and help them feel that connection to the classroom, that pride. Great.
Most definitely. There's so many things happening in the chat. I'm loving what's going on. Thank you for supplying a resource for anti-bias children books. And Carla reiterated what you said. The goal is to understand your students' perspective, right? So as we're diversifying these classrooms, it's really about knowing our students and getting to know them, and your knowledge and acceptance of them is how they feel support, and it's how they learn. Because if they don't feel like you care about them as an individual or as a person, or you're not interested in them, you're not gonna be able to teach them anything, right? And then we go into those challenging, behaviors and that resistance. And so this is the front line of caring and learning about them so we can better support them, and that they can ultimately learn. Like, that's why it's important. What else do we have here? I mean, we talked a lot. We could talk.
I know we could have a whole webinar.
We could have a webinar on the representation of diversity, right? I think that was one of the favorite things at Interact too, right? What people were talking about was just how beautifully it was set up with all these diverse materials that were not overwhelming. It was just a natural part of the classroom, organic, like materials. They weren't commercial. They were, real life materials, and just thoughtfully displayed across the books, across the posters, across, manipulatives. So it's not about, being distracted, really. It's just about this oneness and making sure that we are including all of our population into our classrooms.
Intentional about it too. And I think talked to a couple of people about just sometimes our access to like that diverse, different things might be limited, and being creative about sharing, right? But across classrooms, alternating what you're making available. That's one kind of option to help with that as well. Great.
Yeah.
I see some people, they're jumping ahead to other ones. They're talking about cooperation in the classroom. I don't know, Marnetta, you want to pick one to dive deeper in?
Oh my goodness. Let me catch up. And there's just so much idea sharing, right? Like someone said that for a parent project, they have families work on with their child to share favorite recipe book for the house area. Wow. Right. And then the child has this opportunity to share, right, and lead his or her friends through this process, but also tell us why, why this recipe, why it's important for the family, right? Why did you choose this one? Like so many opportunities to get that for them to not only practice language and their social emotional skills, right? But just share more about themselves. Sorry, I got distracted by that one because I'm pinning that one. I love the idea of that. Encourage contemplation can lead to more engage in order to foster clarifying the expectations and reasons for collaboration before lots of thoughtful things. I don't even know where to begin.
I want to jump into that freedom from background noise because we talked about that beforehand. Did you want to share with everyone?
Okay, so freedom from background noise. I know I've done a lot of observations and I've been in a lot of classrooms, and it always, as an observer, it always bothered me to hear music playing all the time for no reason whatsoever. And then teachers are upset that children can't focus their attention, right? They're reading a book, but music is playing. Like I can't pay attention, right? Because these two things are happening at the same time. Music, background noise, anything that's distracting from the learning should always be on purpose, right? So music has a time, it has a reason. Because it does, if you think about all learners, right? And, I have a very short attention span, so I'm going to get distracted real easily. I need to not have distractions so I can focus and I can learn. So that freedom from background noise isn't just, it's challenging because some people have to fill the air for them to have clear thoughts, right?
Mm-hmm.
So there are people who have white noise. They have, music playing. They have, some podcast going or whatever, because that's how they think. But for children, and for a lot of others, it is distracting, and they can't get the information, they can't learn, they cannot focus with all those other things happening.
Right. And you think their brain is still developing, right? And that's like, it's working really hard. There's a lot going on. And that can just kind of add to this kind of confusion. And I know I was thinking, you made me think of, I was observing in an infant room and just the radio was on, and then the radios go to commercial and like the songs on the radio. And so, and that is very distracting to me as an observer too. Yeah.
Yeah.
Right.
Rita says that she's played some lunch jazz. I love jazz, by the way, during meals. And when meal is wrapping up, I would put on nap music. I always felt it was an additional cue. Yes. So those are intentional, right? Those are cues. But, could you imagine reading a story and you got Barney as a dinosaur playing and you're wondering why, why I want to just get up and dance. So, when we do it on purpose, it does support, right, the goal, right? You're have this background music on and they're enjoying their meal, but also we know how music is in getting us to relax and go to sleep. So,
Right.
yep.
Yeah. And I want to dive into quickly effectiveness of screen time, because I think this is something with, technology is everywhere. And sometimes there's a push to incorporate it, integrate it into learning. But we have to be really mindful about how we're using it and the exposure, that children have to screen time, making sure if we are going to utilize it, it's intentional. But nowadays, at home, kids they don't need to be taught how to use a tablet or anything. Those skills, they're getting that exposure sometimes already. And so, I have been in a variety of classrooms and seen sometimes an overuse of kind of screen time and technology.
Most
And
definitely.
yeah.
I've seen it used as a filler, like just a distraction, right? Like just to sit and, sit and be quiet. Like I just, I don't know what to do with you right now. So I'm just going to give you this thing, right? Where technology, when used, on purpose, could really, really support learning goals,
Yeah.
right? So definitely some yays and nays to that like effectiveness of screen time. Now, all of these things that we've been talking about are part of class environment. And we just have, believe it or not much time left, Michelle. So we probably should move.
Did you want to comment on anyone? I mean, and there's a lot more we could say about each of these, and these examples and more are in the class environment tool. Was there any last ones you wanted to quickly cover?
Okay, materials for imaginary real world play, right? So I love everything, everything dramatic, everything creative, right? Like, but it doesn't have to be costly, right? Think about, things that you can bring in that are realistic. Children should know how to handle, real materials, not, plastic things all the time, right? So like, cereal boxes, old detergent bottles, right? It just makes it more real for them. It makes it more concrete. They're able to like really role play and recreate scenarios and ideas from the materials that you add to the setting. But it doesn't have to be costly. Literally, you can make these things. You can right like menus.
That's what I was gonna say. I've seen menus come from like straight from restaurants and the plastic and everything. But hey, that's real world. And if you can get one or two,
Right.
that helps. So
Chopsticks, you know what I mean? Egg cartons, like just all those things, can add value to the play. It's just whatever. There's no limit on how to make that an interactive, thought-provoking type of experience for the students. There's just no limit. Like just bring all the things. It doesn't have to be commercial. Tablecloths, flowers on the center, high chairs for their baby dolls, like all those things that are these real life things that they can bring their home into the classroom, their actual experiences, their real life connections to the classroom. That's what we want for them.
great. Yeah.
Okay.
We have to move on.
I know, because I'll just keep on going. Like, okay.
You guys don't want to spend the rest of the day here with us?
We do. All right. So when we think about good classroom environments, we want to remember that everything in the classroom should support engaged learning, support behavior, support emotions, and help children feel safe and comfortable. So it can look pretty, you know what I mean? You can add everything can be uniform and, perfect, the right colors, color palette and all that. But if it doesn't meet or contribute to meeting those goals, it's pointless.
Yeah. I think of when I was in the classroom getting wrapped up in like theming things, like that everything had this like certain theme, but like really, prioritizing your time and how you spend your energy to like set up things that are meaningful and intentional for these purposes. Maybe not always just because they look cute, I guess.
Right. Because I mean, we're really looking for this desired outcome, right? The children, especially like in my space, I was a preschool teacher for like ever, early childhood, like, infant toddler classrooms, preschool or whatever. The goal is that kindergarten readiness, right? And so I'm outcome driven. What can I do to support their success from their time beyond me, right? So this arrangement, what I'm doing with these materials, what this classroom looks like, my interactions with them, those are all about how to get them where they can be successful and thrive beyond me.
Great. So should we take a look at our class environment tool? All right.
Yeah, let's do that.
So we've been talking a lot about environments and, drawing those parallels to our class environment tool. And here you can see a little picture of the class environment manual and the score sheets. Like you can see here with the class environment tool, we're setting up a system that helps you measure and improve these specific elements, and making that intentional environment to enhance and deepen those interactions with children.
So again, you know what class is, you know what those behaviors are. How do we use the environment, the things around us to, like she said, make this even better, right? Even deeper, even more effective. So we're just tying those two things together because you already have the stuff. You're already doing having the conversations and the interactions. And now how do those things go together to make sure that, again, children get what they need out of the classroom?
Great.
Next slide.
So we do want to just kind of acknowledge there are other things out there that do look at environment, and this is something new with class. And so we want to kind of highlight some of the things that make the class environment tool different than some of the other tools you might use. And you'll also see some similarities as well. Specifically, we are looking at materials, displays, and arrangements, and then that additional part of how they are supporting the interactions, like we just talked about, how they're enhancing that development or what the children are learning.
Yeah, I think one of my favorite pieces of this is when you're looking at environments, there, again, I can't say it more than enough. I can't say it enough. It doesn't have to be this, I'm going to run to this commercial place and stock my classroom, right? It's affordable. Just so when you're thinking about, I always think about family childcare and the challenges, and in some places the lack of support for those learning spaces. It's low cost things that you can just get from your families, from your house that you're just already using. So you don't have to spend all this money in order to get a good score, to do well in the environment and how it's set up.
And that connects to our last point there, just helping you use the things that you can control. We talked about that earlier with like different places have different size spaces. So how can we be creative, be flexible, think of different arrangements and how to utilize what we have to enhance your environment.
Next slide, please.
Yeah. Okay. So there's a couple of things that class environment does not do. And so we want to just make sure to highlight that as well. Starting with that first one, it's not measuring items that are specific to licensing, safety, or health.
Yeah, so you're not going to find that there. It's strictly about materials that we use for those increasing and enhancing those interactions. And then the next bullet, I know we're both like, and there's more. All right. Those, it's not, how do I put this? So you're having these interactions, you're using these materials, right? In these interactions, but it does not, class environments does not impact your class score, right? So while it's used in observation, right? And that's another good thing, right? It's very small. It only takes like 15 minutes. You have a class observation, it takes like 15 minutes, which is different than, a 3-hour a 3-hour assessment of the environment. So it's just in addition to and part of this classroom observation, but it doesn't impact the score, right? Your interactions are the core, and this is just an added piece of how the environment is set up to support those interactions.
Great. Yeah, and I think that's a good segue because we're going to quickly talk about just the scoring aspect of the environment tool. So you do get a score, but it's not going to be added to your class score. It's separate. And it's on a 3-point scale. And basically you can see here, 1 starting with you don't see evidence of the item through 3 when you see it like most, many, or varied instances. And then when you dive into the class manual, you will see actually how that is, how that looks with each kind of item that you're looking at. There's more details. And so that is our 3-point scale for the environment scoring. And I think a lot of you are also curious about getting trained. So, or figuring out like how to get access to this, taking that next step.
Yeah, and I can kick us off on this slide. So I do see lots of questions about taking the next step, and I'm going to drop a link in the chat if you're interested in signing up to get a training or getting access to this. It's a 5-hour kind of on-demand, you move at your own pace course that explains what all of those elements are of the environment, how to observe, and what they are that help promote those effective educator-child interactions. You do need to be a class observer, so on the class interactions tool in order to sign up for this. And we can drop a link in, just give me a second to learn more about how to become a class observer. But if you are a class observer, then you can sign up at that link that I already dropped in the chat to get access to this course. And I believe, I know we want to be super transparent. This is a $75, but you will need to contact your rep at that link in order to sign up. So it's 5 hours and 0.5 CEUs. Yeah, awesome. I'm so excited. Everybody's super happy to hear about this. And then if your program is collecting class environment data, there is a separate course that educators can enroll in to get a kind of an overview of what we've talked about today. It's a self-guided on-demand course, and that one is only 3 hours, and so it's 0.3 CEUs. So I'll drop that link in again. And did I miss anything about the training itself, Marnetta or Michelle? Well, I could track down these other links.
Oh, you did well.
Yeah, I think Marnetta and I have both been through this training to get familiar with it. And I would say it's asynchronous, but it is as interactive, I feel like, as you can get for being kind of like an asynchronous course. You can like take the infant toddler pathway, you can take the pre-K pathway. There's actual tours of classrooms explaining different items. So all those questions you all had about those pictures, that's happening in that course, and giving you that direct kind of link to where it is in the environment manual and what kind of score it would be. Yeah, it's well done. I mean, I think anyone could really benefit from this.
Yeah, very hands-on, and just making sure that you understand, what you're looking at. So it's not just, these pictures of the classroom. It's, do you know where this, are you able to identify, but also do you know where it would fall as a rating? So you definitely leave understanding very clearly how to use this.
And you can like stop it, come back. There's no time thing for it. There's no grade with it. I mean, you take little quizzes as like checks for understanding, but yeah, there's some flexibility with it too.
Thank you both. I have not, full disclosure, been through the course, so it's nice to hear from 2 people who have been through it. So I dropped all of the links in there, and we are running out of time, and I do want to be super respectful of not only our host time, but everybody who joined us today. And thank you so much for participating in the chat. There was a lot of back and forth discussions while Michelle and Marnetta were leading us through all of the content. So not to worry if you feel like you missed any of the content that Michelle and Marnetta already walked through. We'll send you the recording to this, and we'll share the slides. I know some people might have joined late and missed that announcement. Yes, so we'll be able to share that with you. And when we send out the email, I'll include all of those links that we've dropped in the chat. So don't feel like, I know there's lots of thank yous coming through. And if you can't scroll up to access it, we'll include that in the email as well. And a link or a certificate of attendance. Thank you so much. We are at time, but I do have to very quickly shout out our next webinar. Many of you have probably been on a webinar with Erin Sabina, one of our account executives here at Teachstone. Erin will be covering what is class and how to do it. So if you feel like you're new to class, the interactions aspect and how it fits into your continuous quality improvement system in your program, in your school district, or in your state, Erin will walk through that and all of the different products and services that Teachstone offers, not only to help you measure with the class tool, but improve on class scores and get a really great foundational knowledge of why interactions are so important. And again, speaking about interactions, thank you all so much for interacting with us today. Really loved having the amazing conversations, and be on the lookout for an email from us tomorrow. Take care, everybody.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks.